But in this video, we shall look at 6 very powerful kings of Ghana. But coming number 1 on the list is the Asantehene Otumfuo Osei Tutu II.
Asantehene Otumfuo Osei Tutu II. Nana Onana Lawrence of Dizcovaself Mimu Ase.
But the Otumfuo resides at the Mansia Palace. That is where his seat of authority of governance is established. The Otumfuo is someone that is highly revered, not just in Ghana, but in Africa. He is seen as one of the most powerful kings in Africa and is highly revered in Africa and even beyond Africa. He leads one of the most influential and powerful kingdoms in Ghana. Then he's also someone that is very influential in national affairs. In fact, it doesn't matter the political party that comes into governance, he is always respected. In fact, he is more like a unifier and seen as someone that sets in when there's some kind of a polarized situation, like a unifier. And I know a lot of people might not want to admit this or want to hear this, but Otumfuo is more seen as the king of Ghana, though not officially. Then he's also someone that is the custodian of the Ashanti traditions and culture. So he's happily married to Lady Julia Osei Tutu. In fact, the Otumfuo has a favorite meal, and undoubtedly is fufu and abenkwine. But I know there are accounts they love fufu. In fact, not only even accounts, Ghanaians in general, they like fufu, whether it's with light soup, it's with granule soup, or abenkwine. It's just something that Ghanaians love. The Otumfuo also contributed to the educational system in Ghana when he established the Otumfuo Educational Fund, just to give access and help those that are underprivileged to be able to have access to quality education. The Otumfuo School, both in KUST and in the University of Ghana, Legon. But he was honored with an honorary degree from the University of Harvard. Coming number 2 on the list is the Dagomba king, known as Ya-Naa Mahama II. In fact, he is known as one of the most powerful kings in Ghana. This is because the Dagomba kingdom in history has been noted to be one of the most powerful kingdoms in Ghana and holds a very rich tradition and culture. In fact, his seat of authority is in the Bewa Palace in Yendi. But and he's seen as a unifier. But after a long, prolonged conflict where there was no king, he finally came as a unifier in Dagbon, because he is able to unify all functions and bring all together as one. The number of wives he's married is not known in public, but it's undoubtedly known that he is someone that practices polygamy. For this, mostly with the northern kings. But his best food, but as you get to know, is tuozafi. In fact, tuozafi is one of the staple foods from northern Ghana, mostly enjoyed with different variety of soups, mostly with dawa. That makes the soup very delicious.
Lawrence, that is true.
But Ya-Naa has no record of formal education, but it's most likely got himself involved in agrarian lifestyle. The next powerful king of Ghana that is highly respected is the Okyenhene. That's Osagefo Amotia Ofori Penyim. But his kingdom is the Achim Abuakwa kingdom that is in the eastern region. And then his seat of authority is the Ofori Penyim Fie that is at Chebi. But he's someone that holds a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Connecticut. But he's someone that has a strong influence in environmental protection and in politics. But he's also known as someone that fight against galamsey and the need to have the preservation of our natural resources. And as we all know, but galamsey has actually caused a lot of harm to our natural resources and our environment as a whole. Okyenhene is someone that is highly respected, not only among the Achim people, but also among Ghanaians. He is happily married to a beautiful and a lovely wife, Lady Elizabeth Nana Asabia Ofori Atta. But the next powerful kings of Ghana comes from the Volta region in the personality of Togbe Afede the 14th. But Togbe Afede the 14th is the king of the Agbogomefia of the Asogli state. And then the kingdom is known as the Asogli, which is in the Volta region. And then the seat of his authority is in the Volta region. In fact, he's one of the most educated, if not the most educated kings of Ghana. But among several of his academic accolades, he obtained his master's degree in business management from the University of Yale way back in 1989. But looking at his background with education, he is seen as a modern picture of someone that is a king that combines both the traditional ways and the modern ways of a king and a modern leader. He was the former president of the National House of Chiefs, but he's also someone that is a successful businessman, and he advocates for national development. But he's happily married to his wife, Mrs. Akosia Afede. But as we know, the Evers, their staple culinary food is akwele. And sometimes they also have their favorite food known as ete fufu. And this can be taken with lai soup, palm nut soup, granite soup, etc. Togbe Afede the 14th, Indene Ofio. But let's get to the next most important kings of Ghana, and that takes us to the Gonja land in the person of the Yagbonwura. In fact, that's one of the powerful kings of Ghana. Yagbonwura Jira Mechiro. But he goes to the royal name Yagbonwura B. Kunuto Jewuswale the First, but he was exiled in 2023. His seat of authority is in Damango, in a place known as the Japa Palace. The Gonja Kingdom, if you read history, you notice that they have a very strong connection to the Mali and then the Songhai Empire. These were powerful kingdoms in the early days of history. And I know the Gonjas, mostly they like coca. Why? Because my grandmother, in fact, my grandmother is Gonja, and mostly what I learned is that they have that strong appetite for a soup known as coca with dawa soup. In fact, if you have not taken that soup with tozafi before, you need to go look for it. Next most powerful and important king of Ghana, and that takes us to the Upper West region in the person of the Ya-Naa. He's the king with the royal name Na Fuseni Seydou Pilpu III. That's the Ya-Naa, and his royal seat is in Wa, and is the overlord of the Wala traditional area. He holds traditional authority in the Upper West region, and that his kingdom plays a vital role in the cultural preservation of regional unity and balance. But he's involved in promoting development and peace in the northwest part of Ghana. But he's involved in a lot of decision-making process in the region. But he's also, just as the northern kings, practicing polygamous marriage. Now, these kings, let's see how you greet them. There's a protocol. There's a way you greet them. So let's start with the Yagbonwura. If you get to the Japa Palace, if you walk into the presence of the Yagbonwura, but there's a way you address him. But the chiefs, sub-chiefs, and the Yagbonwura, there's a way you address them. The sub-chiefs are addressed as Garba. Then those that are a bit higher, close to the Yagbonwura, they are addressed as Yira. For instance, the Bolura is addressed as Yira. So when you are greeting him, this an appellation that you need to add. Then if you get to the courtyard, the presence of the Yagbonwura, the Yagbonwura, you can't go and stand there and say Gariba, or you go and say Yira. No, he's above that. Once you start, you get there and you ignorantly address him as Yira or Gariba, you are lowering his rank. You are incurring the wrath of his throne. So you address him as Jira. In fact, what I learned is that they even prefer you call them by their titles, by those appellations like Jira, Yira, Garba. They prefer those titles. They prefer to be called by those titles. So that is how you address them. Then you don't just stand by saying Jira. You need to also show a pose. And in that case, you have to lie down on the ground flat. You need to put yourself on the ground before you can greet him, to show submissiveness to his authority. Now, this is done by the sub-chiefs and the other lower ranking chiefs. When they get his presence, they lie down prostrate, and other important dignitaries who might visit the palace, you need to get on the ground, lie down flat in prostrate. Now, what about women? Are women allowed to greet the Yagbonwura? No, but under some conditions. Unless under the permission of the Yagbonwura. That is when they can now get his presence to greet. But then when they get to his presence to greet, they say a way they greet him. They, in this case, don't lie down prostrate on the ground. They kneel while they greet. And while they greet, their face is on the floor. But then they do the greetings through the linguist. Or if there's communication, through the linguist, who then serve as a middleman between them and the Yagbonwura. Then if it's an elderly woman, while she's greeting, she claps the hands slowly while she's greeting. See, but all this is show how the Ghanaians revere their king, and for their chiefs in general. Then the ever king, how do you greet him? He is addressed as Togbe or Fiaga, and with him also you greet him through the language. You can't just start talking to him directly. You greet him through the language. But in his case, you don't lie down prostrate. You bow down slightly, or in some cases you could kneel down whilst you greet him through the linguist. Then as you are greeting him, you add Togbe Wezo, which means that king, may you live long. You also say Fiama Wole Nu Tifafa Me, which means that king, may you live in peace. So that is how you greet him with that's the males. Then the females, they just like when you're greeting the Otunfo, they also kneel down while they clap their hands softly before they now greet him. Beautiful, beautiful. Let's look at the next king, that's the Okyenhene, the king of the Achims. How do you greet him? But when you are greeting him, you have to bow down or kneel down. You have to kneel down on one leg. Then you greet him through the linguist, that's the Ochami. Then when you are greeting him, you have to add a title, Osajefo. So you greet him by saying that Osajefo Nana Won Kwansu, which means that long live the king. Or you could also add that Nana Utumi Enkoso. So that is how you greet, and that's for the males. Then the females, they also kneel down on both legs. Then they clap their hands softly. But with the case of the males, in some circumstances, the males are allowed to lie down prostrate on the ground before you greet him in certain occasions. Then with the case of the Ya-Naa, how do you greet the Ya-Naa? In fact, you need to get to his palace decently dressed. With the case of the men, they bow down deeply, or in some cases they even lie down prostrate on the ground. Then you don't address him by his name, but you address him by saying Indang Ya-Naa. Then you add na ninyeli, which means king live long, king live long. So that is how you address him. Then the females, For the females, in their case, they kneel down on both legs, then from a distance. Then with the females, they greet him from a distance by kneeling down, and they then clap their hands softly whilst they greet him. And let's look at the Ya-Naa's palace. What is the protocol to observe when you get to his palace? Well, before you get to his palace, you need to be decently dressed. If you are wearing a hat, you need to take it off. Yeah, you need to take it off. Then when you are greeting him, you can kneel down on one leg or on both legs to greet him, or you squat or bow down to show respect to him. Then after you have exhibited this pose, how do you greet? But you greet him by addressing his appellations, his titles. So you use these appellations or titles, Jira or Mbagbengini. So Jira, Mpohin, or Mbagbengini, Mpohin. So that is how you greet him. That's how you address him. But the Ya-Naa's palace is one of the most beautiful palaces, but the architecture looks so unique with the style, very, very unique, and looks very beautiful. In fact, I think within the West African region, and even in Africa, should be one of the most beautiful palaces. So in case you've not visited the palace, yeah, you need to visit. The Ya-Naa is noted to be someone that has a strong educational background and has held several governmental and administrative roles before ascending to the throne. In fact, this has influenced his leadership style. So let's move on to the next one. Then the Otumfuo. If you are to visit his palace, what are the protocols you need to observe? But before you're able to greet him, you need to present yourself in a certain pose. You don't just stand uprightly to greet him. So you either squat slightly or you kneel down on both legs to greet him. Then when you're greeting him, you don't greet him directly. You greet him through the Okyenhene, that's known as the linguist. And when you are to greet, there are certain phrases, there are certain appellations that you need to use. So for instance, you go like Asantehene, Otumfuo Osei the second. Nana, Nana, then you mention your name. So in my case, I will say Lawrence. Then where you're coming from, then you add that me bumimu ase amao. So that is how you exchange. That's how you greet him. And remember, the response will now be, that greeting will now be relayed to him by the Okyenhene, who will now respond back to you. So, and after you have done all this, in case you have to interact with him, you don't initiate a conversation unless you are prompted to. Then when you are done with observing this protocol, interacting with him through the Okyenhene, if you are done with everything and you have to move out of the palace, you don't just turn your back right away to him and start walking away. You walk backwards a certain reasonable distance before you turn your back to walk out of the palace. This also shows honor and respect to the Otumfuo. These things are very important. You need to really know some of these basics before you can visit any of these kings in Ghana. If you find this video helpful to you, do not forget to give it a like, but you can also subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on content of this nature that I bring on this channel.